Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how AWS IoT actions work. So if you see the architecture diagram on the screen, there's a workflow that it shows. So let me go ahead and explain what is happening here, and this is something that we are going to implement in this particular video. So you have AWS IoT service, and inside that in AWS IoT core you can set actions and rules. And in this particular video I'm going to set a rule which is going to republish all the records or all the data from a particular topic into a Kinesis data stream, which is then taken as input from Kinesis Firehose service, and from Kinesis Firehose we are going to store that data into S3 in parquet format. Again, we will see what parquet format is, what Kinesis is, what the Kinesis data stream is, what Kinesis Firehose is, but that's the workflow that we are going to follow. And once that data is stored in S3, we are going to Athena, which is another AWS service that we will use to query that S3 data and use it to visually see what data it is. So Athena is mostly used for running analytics queries on data stored in S3. So that's what we are going to use it for. Again, I will explain each component in detail when we actually go through those particular components. Again, there is another component called AWS Glue, which is another AWS service that is used to store data schema, at least for this particular example. So the Firehose is going to consult that schema when it is going to store the data into S3, and similarly Athena is going to see that schema when it is actually going to query that particular table. So let's go ahead and see how we can implement this in our AWS account. Okay, so to start with, our AWS IoT actions and rules is going to need Kinesis data stream and Kinesis Firehose in order to be configured. So let me go ahead and configure that, and once that is done we will come back to AWS IoT actions and set that rule. So if you go to AWS console, let's go to Kinesis first. So if you go to Kinesis, you can see what it is actually used for. So this should get us on get started page. Yep, there we go. So as you can read, it says easily collect, process and analyze video and data streams in real time, and you can get timely insights and react quickly to the new information, right? So just to give an example, let's say you have an IoT device, something like a thermostat, right, which is recording your current room's temperature and then acting on it. So if you have to do some action based on the temperature, for example, let's say you want to have the temperature as 25 degrees, then what you do is you can stream this data to the backend using Kinesis data stream, and then you can have an real-time analysis using some of the analytics tools that AWS provides, and then instruct thermostat to increase or decrease the temperature accordingly, right? So it will again have authentication, processing of the data, the analytics behind it. So we will not go much deep into that. Again, we will see some aspect of it in this video. Essentially, that is what Kinesis AWS service is used for. So let's go ahead and try to configure AWS Kinesis. So in AWS Kinesis service, there are multiple things that you can do. The simplest thing that you can do is create a data stream. So when you create a data stream, you essentially have a set of producers that can produce the data and put it to a stream. Now stream is a pipeline that can handle the incoming data. Then you can have custom consumers that is going to consume that data and act on it. Now one such consumer is already provided by Kinesis, which is called Kinesis Firehose, and if you see this diagram, it will let you automatically put the data into S3, Redshift, Amazon Elasticsearch, or Kinesis Data Analytics, right? So this is a custom consumer that AWS has provided by itself, but if you do not want to do that, then you can provide your own consumer, right? So if you see this diagram, you can either have inject the data directly to Kinesis Data Analytics, or you can use Spark, or you can use a custom code that is running on EC2, or you can have custom code on Lambda. So you basically create your own consumer and then handle it. You can have a video stream where you can stream video data, and you can have an analytics option as well in Kinesis, but we are not going to use both of this in this particular video, so let's not worry about it. So let's go ahead and start creating a data stream. So let's go ahead and create a data stream. Let's call it test data stream. And once you do that, you need to configure the number of shards. So let's try to understand what the shards is. So your pipeline or Kinesis stream by default handles a particular limit of incoming load. So if I just go ahead and add number of shards 1, you can see that what is the capacity of this particular stream. So you can see the write is 1 MB per second, about 1000 records per second, and the read is 2 MB per second. Now if I change this to 2, this values are going to be doubled, right? So for this video I'm just going to set it to 1, but if you have a load that needs such throughput, then you can go ahead and change the shards, number of shards based on your requirement. And again, you can also change the shards at a later point of time using APIs, and that's called resharding. But for this video I'm just going to keep this as 1 and click on create Kinesis stream. Okay, so our Kinesis data stream is created. You can see that the status is now active, and you can see the total shards remaining is 499. So the maximum number of shards that you can have is 500, and we already have 1 shard in use. So now that we have a Kinesis data stream in place, we need to have a producer and a consumer to consume that data. Now for producer, we are going to use AWS IoT actions and rules to publish or republish the data that we are receiving on topic to the stream. And for consumer, we are going to use Kinesis Firehose, right? But you can also have a custom consumer that is running on EC2, or a custom Lambda that is running that can consume this data. So let's go ahead to data Firehose and try to configure a Firehose delivery system that can consume this data and put to S3. So now you can see you have landed on Kinesis Firehose getting started page. So let's go ahead and create a delivery stream. So I'm just gonna call it my Firehose delivery. And for source, you can either choose to have a direct data coming to this particular Firehose delivery system, or you can take the input from Kinesis stream. Again, like I said, if you need to have custom consumers on your Kinesis stream, then you should have a Kinesis stream and then a Firehose that is getting the data from that stream. But if you do not have a custom consumer, then you can directly put the data into the Firehose delivery system. But in this case, we have created Kinesis stream. So let's go ahead and select that, and let's go ahead and select the test data stream that we just created some time back, and click on next. Now once you do that, it will ask you for a couple of things. If you want to transform the source records with AWS Lambda, now you need to make sure that the records that are coming are in JSON format. So I am already going to publish the data into the iOS topics in JSON format, so we do not have to worry about it. Next thing is convert record format. Now if you want to store the data into AWS S3 into a particular format, then you can use convert record format. So let me go ahead and enable this and show you what it entails. So you can see it lets you choose between one of the formats, Apache Parquet and Apache ORC. So Apache Parquet is a columnar storage, which is a much better storage if you are considering running analytics queries on it. And columnar storage itself has multiple benefits, like it's compressed, so it takes very less size to be stored. It can run the queries faster since the data is stored is very compact, and it is stored in a columnar way, right? So in the traditional relational database, we store the complete row in a particular memory location, whereas in this particular format or columnar storage, we store the entire column, right? So you can read more about it by googling what columnar storage is, but for this video I'm going to use the same, and again we are going to query the same format using AWS Athena service, but we'll come to that later. So let's select Apache Parquet for now. Now you need to select a schema that will be used to store the data into S3, right? Because the incoming message will be of particular schema and you would need a different schema to be stored in S3. So for that you need to configure AWS Glue data catalog. So let's go ahead and do that first. So if you can go to Glue and open it into a new tab. Here it basically does multiple things, but what we are really concerned is to just set that schema. So let's go ahead and add the table that defines the schema. So let's go ahead and add the database first. So I'll just call it my database and let's click create. And once you do that, you can create a table as well. So I'll call it my table and select next. Now once you do that, it needs to have an S3 path where it is stored. So we will have to go to S3 and create a bucket there, or probably use a bucket that is already out there. So let's see if we have a bucket that we can reuse. Okay, so it's not there. So let's go ahead and create a new bucket. So I'm just going to call it 8 hardcore, and let's just create a new bucket. And okay, so 991. How about that? Alright, so our bucket is created. So let's go ahead and copy this back and let's put it here. So it expects S3 and that bucket name, and it also expect a folder. So let's just call it data, and then we'll just say next. And the classification is parquet, like we mentioned in the previous step. So let's click on next. Now here we need to define columns. So I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to say first name, and okay, we do not need a partition key, and add. And similarly we are going to add a last name, and okay, so we have first name and last name. That's sufficient. Let's click on next and click on finish. So now we have our schema ready. So let's just go into S3 and create a folder here. We called it data, so let's just go ahead and save it. Now once that is done, you can go back to Kinesis Firehose, and now let's choose a data. So let's go ahead and refresh this. You can select database, you can select table. Glue version is latest because we haven't made any changes to schema, we just set it once. So let's click on next, and once you do that, you can see it automatically restricts it to S3 because that is what we have configured in AWS S3 Glue database table, and that's something that we have already provided to Kinesis delivery system. So once you do that, you need to specify the destination where it is going to store. Now this should be same as what you have provided in the previous step. So you have to choose the same bucket, and for prefix again you have to choose the same folder, right? It automatically gives you what you have already set as the glue schema. So you need to put the same thing. So for error, let's go ahead and put probably error. So this prefixes are nothing but folder inside this bucket. So if there is error in transformation, it will go to this folder, else it is going to this folder. So we do not want backup, so let's click on next. Now this is the buffer size after which it is going to put the data into S3. So for performance reasons, it does not continuously put data into S3. So I'm just going to put it as minimum as possible, which is 64 and 60. So once that is done, I do not need a compression or encryption. So let's go ahead and click next. But before you do that, make sure your logging is enabled so that you can see logs in CloudWatch logs. And next thing that you need to do is you need to set up an IAM role. So let's go ahead and create a new role, because I don't think we already have a role for that. It's generally good to create a new role to do that. So alright, so what it says is create a new role. It will be called Firehose delivery role, which is fine. So click on allow. Okay, so the role is now created. Let's click on next, and it will give you a summary of what you have selected, and select create delivery stream. Now this should go ahead and create a Firehose delivery stream that is going to get the input from our test data stream, and it is going to put the data into our S3 with respect to the schema that we defined in AWS Glue service. So now once that is done, let's go to our IoT service, and let's set our IoT rule and action to pre-publish the data to our stream, and then we should be able to see the data into S3, and then query the data using Athena and see how it looks. So let's go to go to action. You need to select action, which is on the left hand side. Here you can create a call it test rule, and we do not need. Okay, so you need to give a query here. So I'm just going to say select asterisk from. So if you open this, it will give you a little bit more reference of how queries work. So as you can see, you can give a format something like this, which is a/p. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say maybe attacker/test. Now this is nothing but the topic that we expect the published records to be picked up and applied this rule on. So once you do that, you need to specify an action what needs to happen when you on this set of records. So click on add action, and here you can see you can either send the message directly to Kinesis Firehose stream, or you can send the message to Kinesis stream. Like I mentioned before, if you need a custom consumer, then you create a Kinesis stream, or you can directly push it to Firehose stream. The reason I am using Kinesis stream in this case, just so that I can cover Kinesis stream as well as Kinesis Firehose stream and explain what each purpose of each is. So let's go ahead and select Kinesis stream and click configure action, and we need to choose which stream it will go ahead and republish data into. Partition key. So for partition key, just let's give first name. So if you visualize how data stream works, we have configured shards. So there are multiple shards that are going to handle the stream data, right? So this is the key that decides which shard this particular data goes into, right? So depending on the first name, it is going to choose which shard it is going to handle this load. So again this needs a role which will essentially give IoT permission to publish data into the stream. So let's again go ahead and create a role. I'll just say my IoT Kinesis role and click on create role. Okay, so now that our policy is attached, let's click on add action, and I think we should be good. So let's go ahead and click on create rule, and let's see, it says failed to create rule, unexpected character. Okay, so let's see what we have done wrong here. I guess we do not need a semicolon. So let's go ahead and try to create rule again, and there we go. So the rule is now created. You can click here and you can see the thing that it is done. It is going to select all the records from this particular topic, and it is going to apply this action to it, which is nothing but republish or send the message to Amazon Kinesis stream. So now that we have this topic, let's go ahead and copy this and publish some data into it. So to do that, you can go to test, and you can actually specify this topic, click on subscribe, and you can publish the messages here. Now if you remember the schema, we have first name and last name. So let's go ahead and add that. You have first name and you have last name, and let's just add some dummy data, which is Aniket, and the last name is Sakor, and that should be enough. So let's go ahead and publish topic. So let's just change few and keep publishing. So remember, we have a buffer of 1 MB or 60 seconds. So let's just publish a few more just to make sure that our probably 1 MB limit is reached, or at least 60 seconds limit is reached. So I'm going to publish a few more, and okay, I think that should be good. So let's go back to our Kinesis stream. and let's go to data stream first and see if the data is actually getting published. So if you go to data stream and if you go to monitor, you should be able to see the data that is sent over here. So I see some data that is being sent. Let's go ahead and see data Firehose if the data is being actually forwarded to Firehose system. So let's click on that and click on monitoring, and let's see. So we do not see any data that is being sent here right now. So let's go back to our IoT tool and just make sure we have set everything correctly. So let's publish this couple of more times, which is fine. Let's go back to our action and make sure we have set everything correctly, which is fine. So it's going to select from eat hardcore test. It is going to stream to this. It has a role. Okay, so it is doing that. Let's go ahead and quickly check cloudwatch rule as well if there is any issues there, and let's see what is happening out there. Okay, so there are no logs here, so hopefully the issue would be that it is taking time to actually show up the data. So let's go to S3 and see if our data is published, and you can see that there is already some data that is published. So it is probably that the monitoring tool is taking some more time to show up the data, but essentially you can see that the data is already stored in S3 in parquet format. So let me go ahead and show the last thing to you, which is Athena. So if you go to Athena, which is used to do run analytics on S3, so we are going to use this to query our Glue table schema and the actual data that is stored in S3. So if you read this, Amazon Athena is a fast, cost-effective interactive query service that makes it easy to analyze petabytes of data in S3 with no data warehouse or cluster to manage. So let's go ahead and click on get started, and here we are going to connect to the database that we defined in AWS Glue. So we do not need a tutorial. Let's go. And so it has already selected my database and it has already selected my table. So let's go ahead and just query this. Select asterisk from my table. So this is syntax is very similar to your relational database syntax. So if you run this, you should be able to see the queries. There we go. You can see you can see all the data that we actually published using AWS IoT. So let me go back to the architecture again and reiterate this one more time. So we have AWS IoT infrastructure. We created an action. We set up a rule that is going to republish all the records that are published to a topic to a Kinesis data stream. Now Kinesis data stream is then input into a Kinesis Firehose delivery stream that is going to convert the data into parquet format, which is a columnar storage using schema that we have defined in AWS Glue, and then it is going to store that into S3 bucket. Then finally we are going to use AWS Athena service that is going to again use the same schema that we have defined in AWS Glue service and run analytics query on S3 and show you the output result. So that's all for this video. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.